Okay, welcome to Rider K, the as-is rider to the FARBAR contract. Now, if you've attended our FARBAR contract online, our FARBAR contract is the as-is contract. So, because of the high regularity of the as-is contract being the go-to contract, we have taught it as the contract of choice. However, there is a what we're going to call a FARBAR normal contract or regular contract, and there are times when you may be in a situation where the FARBAR regular is being used, and then you're looking to, and by the difference as far as inspections and repairs are concerned is that the FARBAR regular does have repair limits that the seller is obligated to. We will probably load a class called the FARBAR regular and at least make sure we note the areas in which it differs from the FARBAR as is, which is basically this one section. That being said, if you have the FARBAR regular and someone wants to add the as-is or amend it to make it as-is, then this is the form you would use. All right, let's read our note at the top here. Please listen to the audio. This writer would take a FARBAR regular contract, one with repair limits in paragraph 9, not paragraph 9 of the as-is, but paragraph 9 of the FARBAR regular, and make it like an as-is contract. You can get the most of the discussion on the as-is portion of this writer. So the portion that we're going to talk specifically about what as-is means and buyer's rights and so on under that is going to be the same information we had under the repair obligations, paragraph 12 of the as-is contract. If you go back and listen to that class, it's going to be similar in nature to what this means. All right, let's also make sure we note that in paragraph 2 of the writer below has very similar verbiage as the as-is contract when it comes to inspections, repairs, and the buyer's right to cancel. All right, so if you want more details on the as-is portion of it, then you need to go back and listen to the as-is section of the as-is contract. I know there's a lot of as-is there, but that would be paragraph 12 of the contract class that we have recorded. Okay, let's go. Number 1, seller's obligations. Paragraph 9A, again, on the regular contract, paragraph 9A has 3 different repair limits. One's called a general repair limit, one's a WDO, or wood distorting organism repair limit, and one is a permit limit. Paragraph 11, property maintenance, and paragraph 12, property inspection and repair are deleted. So what it's doing is taking all those and deleting them in their entirety from the old contract, from the regular contract, and supplanting that with the verbiage that's here. It does not relieve the seller's disclosure obligations, means the seller cannot fail to disclose. It doesn't give them the right to, hide things, except as provided in the rider. All right. Now, note in red here, I made a note. Note in red in paragraph 1 that the seller is restating that they know of no violations, right? That the seller has received no written or verbal notice from a governmental entity or agency as to currently uncorrected governmental building, governmental or safety code violation. And also, though, this also protects the seller. Seller extends and intends no warranty and makes no representation of any type. All right. So what your seller, if you're using this and representing the seller needs to understand that they are once again noting that they have no information about any of these issues. If they do, then they need to amend that or make sure that that has been fully disclosed. Okay. Part C, subject to the provisions over here, C offers some protection of the seller and agents regarding the condition of the property. Subject to provisions, limitations, the rider, and to the extent permitted by law, buyer waives any claims against seller and real estate licensee involved in the negotiations of this contract for any things that exist after closing. However, subject to the provisions and limitations of this rider and to the extent permitted by law, any attorney can come on and try and say, hey, look, this is something the seller did know and intentionally withheld from us, or if they try and lump the agent in with that, like, hey, by default, you received a prior inspection report, so you knew about the leaky roof, you never disclosed that to us, and now we have an issue. So just, again, you're going to learn from me that we over disclose. Okay. As I mentioned above, paragraph 2, which starts here, is similar verbiage to the as-is contract language. Note the default to 15 days for the inspection. Okay, that's this default here, right? Buyer shall have 15 days if left blank. You can put anything in here, but this is the same spot where on the as-is contract you would have to have all the inspections performed. All right, to have such inspections performed. Also note C where buyer at their sole discretion. So here, this just talks about if the contract is terminated, all right, and the buyer shall repair everything back to where, if it doesn't go to closing, then the buyer tore holes in the wall, the buyer's inspector tore holes in the wall to inspect, then they need to repair that, okay? And if it doesn't go to closing, if it goes to closing, then that's the buyer's issue anyway, they own the property. Part C, if the buyer determines in their buyer's sole discretion, that's a huge word, by the way. We talked about it in the as-is contract, but that gives the buyer sole discretion to cancel the contract. It doesn't matter if the seller agrees with it or not, if the buyer at their sole discretion. So if you don't like that verbiage as a seller's agent or a listing agent, then don't allow this contract. I'm just telling you, it's a very broad term. It allows a buyer a get out of jail free card 100%. So understand that, and if the buyer wants it and you represent the buyer, great. If you represent the seller, make sure they understand that that's in there. And if they're concerned about it, then obviously the answer here would be to shorten the inspection period, okay? However, all right, Part D says, if they miss their inspection period or fail to deliver written notice, then they accept the property as is. That's what Part D says. Again, similar verbiage that's in the as-is contract, things that we covered there, all right? This one, paragraph 3, seller still has to maintain the property. Again, similar to the as-is contract. Just because they're selling it as is does not, there is what's called a maintenance requirement in the contracts, and that requires that the seller maintain the property in its current condition except for normal wear and tear until the closing date. So for instance, let's say when we did our inspection and it's an as-is, the buyer found that everything was great, hunky-dory, or the things that they did find they were okay with, but in the interim between the end of the inspection and the closing, the AC breaks. The seller is still obligated to repair things back to the condition they were during the inspection. So you cannot say, oh, sorry, as is, you didn't find it. Well, we didn't find it because at the time of the inspection it was working and now it's not working, all right? So you need to understand that in both the regular as-is or the as-is contract and quite frankly the regular contract, there is what we call a maintenance requirement where the seller has to maintain the property in its current condition through the end. And that would include, more than likely, a lot of sellers like to turn off power and water prior to the closing date. This is the biggest bugaboo I have. I mean, for Pete's sake, leave the power and water on, right? Here in Florida, things get moldy and ugly and nasty quickly. So just allow them to, it's going to help your maintenance requirement if you will allow the utilities to be on so that people can do what they need to do and that the property can be maintained properly. All right, so know that that's there. So again, reminder, this takes a regular contract and makes it an as-is contract. Understand that the verbiage is mostly from the as-is contract in and of itself, but there are a few little glitches in here and the seller needs to be aware of. That's why I noted it in red that they are agreeing to by signing this and converting it over. All right, as always, if you have any questions, reach out.